the people of these communities will ever have a chance to see. And so originally it was all extractions, it was all pulling teeth, and these dentists pulled a lot of teeth. But here in the last few years, I want to say about 6-7 years ago, we were able to purchase our first portable dental unit. And that dental unit allowed the dentists to actually start doing fillings. And that was a game changer for the dental area, because you could go into a community and the young kids we'd actually be able to do some fillings as opposed to just pulling teeth, and made a huge difference. It did, however, mean we had to take our own generator, we had to take our own compressor for the dental instruments to work. But it was an absolute worthwhile effort to offer that option of a filling as opposed to just a straight extraction.
It's 10 o'clock.
We'd also have 3 to 4 medical professionals, and that would include a few nurses as well. And we would do basic exams, healthcare exams, take care of lots of babies, and any emergencies that actually that would find us. And invariably, there would be an emergency somewhere in the surrounding areas we would get involved in, and we would be the first line medical care for the communities that we would serve in. If we were lucky, we would get an optometrist to join us. And that would be, maybe we'd get one optometrist a year. This was my favorite area to work in on any team, because it was immediate gratification. When you gave a mother eyeglasses so that she could see again, she could read her Bible, she could thread a needle, or you gave glasses to a grandmother so they could see their grandbabies again, it was a heartwarming experience, hugely impactful for us to have an opportunity to change people's lives that way. I've had people tell me once they got glasses, fishermen would tell me that now they could finally sew a net again, and it was truly life-changing. We are completely self-sufficient. We take our own medicines. We take all our own medical supplies. We have to anticipate what we're going to see while we're there, because we have very little access to going back to a community that might have a drugstore. So we are out there pretty isolated for a whole week, and so we have to bring whatever it is that we're going to need to get through that week. That means there's lots of counting of supplies, trying to figure out how to stretch the supplies so that they'll last an entire week, and lots of inventory, counting and uncounting, packing and unpacking. Very shortly after we got very good at sending teams down to Central America, the volunteers started to raise the question, why can't we do more than just a medical and dental team? And so very quickly, we started taking on individual projects. And these projects started out small at first, but very quickly they broadened into all sorts of different interests that were represented by the volunteers that we had along with us. The most common area of a project that a volunteer would want to take on would be training. In the upper left-hand corner is a picture of a dentist that's been on many trips with us. And he just decided he just did not want to go on trips anymore and pull teeth. He wanted to make a more long-term impact. And so he developed his own little dental hygiene training. And he would have me get together big crowds of little kids And he'd go to the schools if there was a school, and he would spend time teaching kids how to brush their teeth, how to take care of their teeth. We would bring down hundreds and hundreds of toothbrushes and give out toothbrushes. Another very interesting story, a few years back, a fireman from Cal Fire joined us, and as a lay volunteer like myself. And he was so taken with the organization, he said, but I'm a fireman. I don't really have anything else to train. But we found him one of the communities that we frequent as we're going in and out of a particular area. The fire department never had any opportunity for training. And so he was able to bring down a group of firefighters that put on training to show these firefighters how to do extraction of accident victims, how to do high elevation extractions, how to move patients and get them to the hospital in the safest way possible. But this is a perfect example how a volunteer takes on a particular project that's of interest to them, and within the community of Medico, makes a huge contribution to the community with something that's special to them. Other examples of projects that we've taken on over the years were all sorts of health education classes, medical seminars. We do a lot of continuing education for nurses, because nurses are the frontline health providers. And so if you want to impact the health of the community, you begin with the nurses. And so we had lots of good response with people wanting to come down and help us train nurses. I'll mention one other project that's relatively new that I got very excited about. This was a joint project with an organization called Days for Girls. And it's an organization that puts together kits and training for young girls to talk about girls' health, their menstrual cycles, and explain to them how their body works, and puts together a small kit for the little girls, for the young girls, about how to manage their periods. I was on the very first trip down where we were going to pilot this, and was really rather skeptical at first how this would be received. The nurses that were going to actually give the presentation asked to get small groups, 10 to 15 girls at a time, to have these presentations. And so I got the first group together, and we had them off by themselves so they wouldn't be bothered by passerbys and wouldn't become too much of a spectacle. And it turned out to be phenomenally successful. We thought we were only going to do 2 or 3 presentations that trip. We could have done 10 presentations. We had young women, we had girls, we had young women, young ladies coming. Everywhere we went, we would get asked, could we do another presentation for this small group of girls and women? So it's something we've been adding here. We were adding on all of our most recent trips, but a wonderful organization, Days for Girls. If it's something that's of interest, I highly encourage you to look into that organization. Well, not all of the special projects we've done over the years have been training. We got into some infrastructure things, again, because it was an interest of a particular volunteer that took the initiative and said, I want to do something that helps this community that I just visited. So this is a picture of an example where we teamed up with, I believe it was Save the Children, to work on a clean water and sanitation project. We've done projects like this. We worked with Habitat for Humanity and actually built a clinic. I'm sure there's a lot of people right here in First United Methodist that recognize this picture because First United Methodist was a big supporter of this project and helped us raise a lot of the funds that made that clinic there in the yellow, made that clinic possible. But that was a clinic, served the community, had no access. The closest clinic was about 4 hours away. And with the help of Habitat for Humanity, we were able to build that clinic. Another example of a project our volunteers got involved with were these stoves, a community stove project. I think we installed about 150 stoves in different homes that were just absolutely impossible to survive in because the smoke in the buildings were so bad. And so we were able to help with these stoves. And here's something I'm sure that's quite familiar to a lot of people. One of the communities we spent a lot of time in and got to know the sisters of a local Catholic church actually worked with us, and through a lot of support, organizations like First United Methodist, we actually built a pregnant woman's center. And it became known as the Linda Peters Hogar Materna. And it's one of those hugely popular and very successful projects that is still going quite strong even today. And here's a picture that's only a couple years old. This is something I was actually quite involved in. We were working in one of the most remote parts of Honduras, down on the coast, very hard to get to area, and prone to lots of hurricanes and storms coming in off the coast. There's a few clinics out there, but not many. And we went to several of these clinics, worked nearby. And one emergency room doctor up in Fairfax, Virginia was with us one time. And we arrived at a site similar to this one and walked into the clinic, and there was about 2 inches of water in the floor of the clinic because it had been raining most of that week. And there was 2 nurses trying to serve the community standing in water. And that ER doc grabbed me by the shoulder and walked me outside and went around the corner in tears. And he said, "Craig, I can't allow a nurse trying to take care of a community work in conditions like this. We have got to put a roof on this clinic." And with his help and a lot of push from other people in the organizations, we were able to put the money together, buy the materials, have the materials shipped up by boat, put onto a canoe, and brought out to this very remote village, and got a new roof on that clinic in about 6 months. Since then, we've done about 5 other roofs. And again, it's a game changer for these communities because this is their lifeline. This is the only thing they have for healthcare. And the nurses that man these are the only people that they can go to. And it's not always projects. Sometimes it's actual individuals. It's a person-to-person involvement. And over the years, we've involved in 3 that I can remember. Ophelia, who had the severe club foot. She's there on the right-hand side. The conjoined twins on the left-hand side, we brought to the U.S. to have a surgery to separate the twins, and a young boy that we brought that to the U.S. to have heart surgery. Again, it was one of those where you're working at a person-to-person level, and someone took an interest and made a huge difference in the lives of these people. I'll close by saying a few words about Medico in the days of COVID. When the pandemic really started to hit, we had to make a decision fairly quickly on what we were going to do. We had 4 trips scheduled for 2020, and it occurred to us that it wasn't so much as us getting down to Honduras and not being able to get back because borders would be closed, it became obvious we became the biggest threat to the people we might be trying to help, because we go to very remote areas and they might be able to postpone the impact of COVID for quite some time unless inadvertently one of us on a medical team brought it down and introduced it into their community. So it was one where we, in order to protect them, we had to stop all of our trips. We canceled 4 trips. We had already a lot of medicines, about $4,000 or $5,000 in medicines already teed up for these trips, and a lot of it already in country. We had to donate these medicines so they wouldn't expire. Donated the medicines to some local hospitals or clinics that we work with. We had a project on tap to rebuild a clinic on the far eastern side of the country. That had to be canceled. Then we started to work with these hospitals, and these hospitals have little or nothing in terms of personal protection equipment and gear. And so we worked with these hospitals to get them some masks, get them some gowns, and foot coverings. Another thing that they needed desperately was oxygen regulators. When they needed to put somebody on oxygen, the regulators they had. So we worked with another organization up in Minnesota to locate oxygen regulators. Again, it's a country with a very weak healthcare infrastructure, so something like this is they're completely unprepared for. We realized very quickly we can't send enough masks and we can't send enough gowns to Honduras. We had to find a way to make them more self-sufficient. So we started working with some different organizations and helped them with supplies, materials, threads and things to allow them to start manufacturing their own masks there locally, so we wouldn't have to be shipping masks down. We found 2 organizations that we worked with to make masks. They're making masks. First, obviously, they made masks for everyone in the hospital, but even throughout the community as well. We continue to try to locate the masks for the medical people. Here's a picture of masks as well as the gowns there in the background. Those are oximeters, the 3 boxes at the bottom of the screen. So we stay in contact with the hospitals that we work with. They let us know where the most immediate requirements are. We do what we can to help them. Here a couple of weeks ago, we got a very tragic reminder of a list of the doctors that have already passed away due to COVID in Honduras, and it was a moving message and gave us all a renewed emphasis on why we had to redouble our efforts to help these friends of ours through this very, very difficult time. So with that, my closing message is, right here in Georgetown, a hugely successful humanitarian organization was started, has accomplished more than Linda and I could have ever imagined. Since 1990, we've had over 175 missions, and I think Linda's gone on nearly all of them. I'm just kidding, Linda. She's gone on half of them, I'm sure. We've serviced over 225,000 patients. And we have an unbelievable community of volunteers, about 3,000 plus volunteers all over the country, and as I said, some outside the country that volunteer to go on these. We never have problems filling a team. because there's volunteers that want to go. It's a very moving experience, as I said. So my parting message, I suppose, Medico is not special in its ability to help people. There's lots of good nonprofits out there. If you're not involved in a nonprofit, I highly encourage you to do so. It will surprise you about how fulfilling it can be and what a small group of people can accomplish. Secondly, if you can't be involved in a nonprofit, help the people that are. And Linda and Norm are a wonderful example of the support that they have gotten from the Georgetown community and the huge dividend that the support they've gotten from the community has realized in Honduras. And finally, I'll be happy to take some questions after this, but finally I would say lots of people will try and measure the success of a nonprofit by the number of people you help. But I'm a big believer that the people that benefit the most from efforts like this are, in fact, the volunteers, and how we change the lives of volunteers, and how fulfilling it is to us as the volunteers when we participate in an effort like this. So with that, Linda, would you like to add a closing comment or two, or we can throw it open to questions? How do I need to?
You're muted, Linda.
Sure. Yeah, so Craig, you can do a stop share if you want.
Okay.
At the top.
All right.
Okay, I think it's obvious that both Craig and myself and Norm and many other people and volunteers have a great passion to try and help where we can, trying to pay it forward in our own lives. And I really appreciate Craig sharing some of his thoughts and some of the pictures that we have, what you all have helped us do over 30 years. This has certainly not been something that Norm and I have done ourselves or Craig. It's the combination of a lot of us. It's donors, it's volunteers, and it's the Hondurans who have been very supportive and grateful for the work that we have done as well. And I know that many of you remember when Hurricane Mitch hit the country, hit Honduras and Nicaragua, and the number of hours that we spent at our warehouse here in Georgetown of getting food ready, getting supplies ready, first aid stuff ready, and we were able to send 10 containers of supplies down during that time. And what an impact it made. And again, I can't say enough about the gratefulness of the Hondurans, who have been the benefactor of your efforts and your support as well. Also during our history, as things presented themselves to us, we found that we were able to, like Craig said, bring surgical cases to the U.S. to get help, but we also sent 10 surgical teams into Honduras over the years. And we brought surgeons and doctors from all across the U.S., but a number of them from the Austin area. And we worked in 2 different hospitals in San Pedro Sula and in Tegucigalpa, the capital, and found that, we were supporting the doctors there. They were in abundance of cases that needed attention, and they couldn't get to them all. So that's where we really, felt that we could help. We pack all of our supplies and medicines, like Craig said, on our other teams. We would do the same for our surgical teams. Quickly thinking back on Hurricane Mitch, with all the funding that we received, we were able, toward the end, to gift over $120,000 in grant funding to various NGOs in the country. And it may have been to rebuild schools. It may have been to gather food for families in certain villages. It may have been, whatever. But we were able to gift over $120,000 because of our donors, And let me insert in here right now, we are an all volunteer organization. So all of us who are working with Medical right now are doing it from their hearts. And it is obviously a passion of mine for all these years, but we can never thank all of you enough for you are the heart of Medico and you have made it all possible. So, Craig, I'll let you take some questions.
Be happy to.
Well, I'd like to start out, if I might, both for Craig and or Linda. What's the logistics of getting all these supplies down there? I mean, that's in itself a feat. How do you do that?
Go ahead, Craig.
That's an excellent question. Over the years, we've learned what things we can source in Honduras and store in Honduras so we don't have to move it don't have to bring it across the border every single time, and what has to be brought down from the U.S. And nowadays, we've got it to the point where we bring mostly medicines down from the U.S. for each trip. Things like medicines, things like toothbrushes, in addition to all of our personal gear. And we have stored in Honduras the gear that is the non-perishables, the dental chairs, the compressors, the generators. When we're working in the east part of the country, the tents, the sleeping bags. So it's mostly finding what can you keep down there and not have to bring down each time, and what has to be brought down. And so things like medicines, they go in everyone's luggage. Typically, a volunteer gets one bag for personal gear, and one bag will be dedicated to gear, medicines for the trip. Hope that answers your question.
Rita.
Just a comment. You may be interested to know that some of those kits for Days for Girls came from one of the UMW groups at First Methodist Church. So you may have brought some of our Days for Girls kits to Honduras, and I'm really excited to hear about that.
Yeah. I'll tell you, if I could, I'll tell you a quick story. On the first trip, we tried the Days for Girls. And again, I was a little skeptical about how this would go over, and realized very quickly this was going to be a huge success. The way I got the girls in groups is I went and talked to, there was a small school, a 3-room schoolhouse in the village where we were working, and I went and talked to the person in charge of the school and explained what we were doing, and he helped me arrange for the girls to get out of class and come for the session. After the first day that it was so successful, the head of the school came to me and said, the boys want a session. And he asked, do we have a session for the boys? And I'd heard there was a boys version of this. And so I went and talked to the nurses, and I asked the nurses that did the Days for Girls session, do you want to do a similar session for the young boys? And the nurses were absolutely all for it. And so we did a session for the boys. And I thought the session was going to be a lot of, horse playing and joking around and things like that. But a group of about 20 boys that were probably middle school and high school age sat there for nearly an hour and a half and listened to these 3 nurses very seriously, having a very frank discussion about their health issues, about sex issues, and sexually transmitted diseases and things like that. phenomenally successful. So my applause to the whole organization.
Craig, Craig, can you hear me?
Yes, I sure can.
What would you say would be your greatest needs at this point in time?
Oh, that's always a hard one. I would just say it's more trips. Everything begins when you launch another trip, and so we do 4 to 6 trips just because that's what the organization can handle right now. I'd love to see us do more, and I would say more trips because we go down there and like those clinics that we came back from, and it was heartbreaking to see those nurses try to take care of a community and the conditions the clinics were in, and for us as a team to come in and put a new roof on that clinic was a huge impact on that community. And so we found the volunteers that love to do that kind of work, and we were able to raise the money for it and overcome all the logistics problems for it. So more trips beget more projects and more benefits. So I guess that would be my answer. Linda, you have a perspective?
No, I think you're right there. And, of course, it's always funding, but there are so many people out there wanting to join us and join the efforts of not necessarily Medico, but the cause. And as Craig alluded, the construction project of the new roof has been a game changer for so many of those villages. If you could only have seen what some of these clinics look like when we got there, with rusty furniture, buckets sitting there during the rain, some plaster falling down just because of a very bad roof. And that was the same thing with the Hogar Maternity Center in Monteverde, where we saw where these pregnant women were coming down the mountain, having to stay in this dirt floor home that had been loaned to the clinic there at the time. Deplorable conditions. And so, these are the things that we know we can help with, but, it does take funding. But it takes the team effort to make it happen. Like Craig, if we could send more teams down, and that's what we're hoping to pick up again once COVID issue is over, and so we can add more to our plate regarding some of the great projects that are going on.
And the team effort is important to talk about. As Craig alluded to, we have doctors from throughout the nation who join this organization, many of them for several trips on an annual basis. It's been fun. I'm usually pretty quiet about this, as you all know. The organization has been a hugely emotionally wonderful thing for us. And you can see, there's the heart of it right there. You see why I married her.
Linda and Craig, what about supplies? Is that something that, we could step in and help with it all? I'm just curious.
Something like supplies in terms of things like those days for girls, because that's not something that's easy for us to source another place. We have good sources of medicines. You have organizations here in the U.S. that sell medicines just to nonprofits like ourselves. So the medicines we get can be are pretty inexpensive. We still spend $3,000 or $4,000 on medicines each trip. But to me, that's just money well spent. So, and then the rest of the supplies is just by its very nature, it's things that we have to get in Honduras, and we pay too much for them, but that's the prices that you have to pay.
And too, a lot of our doctors and nurses will bring supplies from where they're working, you know, to add to what we have. So they let us know what they can bring, and then so we put it together and know, okay, we've got enough of this, we need a little bit more of this or whatever. So our volunteers help out a lot too.
True.
Mary Ann Inman, I think.
Dave, yeah.
A question, how do you arrange to feed everybody on each of these trips?
That's a really good question. You get very creative with rice and beans is the short answer. I hope you saw in one of those pictures some of the tents that we have, because we carry all of our own food, all of our own water in addition to all the medical supplies and medicines. Especially when you're working on the coast, you have to sleep in tents because the bugs can get pretty bad. So if we need it, we carry it in. So is the short answer. We typically will get a local woman or a couple of people to help cook for us. We'll provide the water. We'll provide all the food. They'll help us put together to actually do the cooking for us. But it's stuff that we'll bring in.
I do want to mention here that there's nothing more special than to go on a trip with Craig, to have him get up early in the morning, start boiling the water, and by the time everybody gets up, we have Starbucks coffee ready to go. So that's one of Craig's gifts to a team, is he brings the Starbucks coffee, and so we have it every morning.
Yeah, a team can't start without coffee.
Yeah. And we used to do a lot of our own cooking when we first started working on the Mosquito Coast area. But we would bring our own food in, and one specialty that Craig would always work up in the evening is what he called tuna. And it came, what was it? It's like tuna and noodles or something.
Right.
So
you get very creative. You get very creative.
Very creative, absolutely. Right. But we survive.
And the same way with we're working in places that there is no place to go shower, so we have a crew that will construct some type of a shower facilities. We'll have some big barrels to bring in barrels of water so we can all take bucket baths. But you have to think all of that through, and the people that handle the logistics. I mean, that's why you have so many lay volunteers on a team, because there's just a long list of logistics to keep 10, 15, 20 people working for a whole week.
Yeah, this is Bob here. So on the COVID-19 area, I mean, so since this is, I guess, a semi-remote place, is COVID-19 a real problem already there? Or, because I understand your concern about bringing it in, but do they have a big outbreak of that or what?
Yes, and unfortunately, it's gotten very bad here lately. It did not arrive in some of the more remote areas for about 3 months. It was about 3 months before they had their first case in the Mosquito Coast area that Linda mentioned earlier. But now it's arrived, and I'd actually talked to the head of the hospital a few weeks ago, and they had taken over a building and made it their COVID ward. They had, I forget the numbers now, 40, 50 COVID patients. This is a hospital that there's no such thing as a respirator there. There's probably no respirators outside of Tegucigalpa and San Pedro Sula in the whole country. And even something as simple as oxygen has to be brought in on a ferry. And so the big tanks of oxygen, they'll use and empty out, put on a ferry, have to take the ferry ride. That's about a day and a half, 2 days to the closest town, get refilled and brought back. So something like this will devastate these areas just because they have so little healthcare infrastructure. And I'm sure that the numbers are much, much worse than are being reported because people die of pneumonia in those areas all the time. And so I'm sure there's cases of COVID and people dying of COVID that they think is pneumonia or flu or something like that. So unfortunately, it's very bad, and that's why we put such a big effort on trying to come up with some protective gear for the healthcare people in these communities. There's not a lot of them, and so the ones that are there really need to be careful.
I think Dave Edmond has his hand up.
One more question. How do you address the malaria issue?
That's an excellent question. If you're working in the highlands, the coffee growing parts of the country, malaria has never been an issue. If you work down on the coast, where I've been most of the last 5 years, or about been my trips on the coast, we all take an anti-malaria drug before the trip. You start it 2 or 3 days before the trip, and you take it 3 days after the trip. But malaria is not something you fool around with, so we insist on everyone take anti-malaria drugs if you're going to go to that part of the country. Good question.
Linda, Norm, Craig, we really appreciate all you guys do. I'll tell you what, it's...
Alson's got a question.
All right, go ahead. Who had a question, Bob?
June Bolson. June Bolson.
Oh, June.
June, go ahead. Unmute yourself.
I just wanted to do a testimonial that if you really want to realize how blessed you are and how wonderful Norm and Linda and those that work in it, go on one of the trips and you will see. It is volunteer because it is the most rewarding of any of the volunteer work that I have ever done. Thank you, Linda, and thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Janine, do you have a comment? No? Okay.
Righty. Well, gosh, thank you very, very much. We all enjoyed this. So I know some of us in the class are familiar, but some of you aren't. So I hope you found this helpful. I know, gosh, we appreciate you guys. Are such a blessing. And thank you again so much. Join us next week because we have Reverend Jim Connor, who's going to share with us some Andy Griffin knowledge, lessons. So stay tuned. Thank you so much and have a good day.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Craig.
My pleasure. Thank you all.
Thank you so much.